Hello, I'm Justin Whitty, and you are listening to the Cleve Cast. The Cleve Cast is the weekly podcast that covers all things behind the scenes at the Cleve Carney Museum of Art. Since we are still in the middle of the Hokusai and Ukiyo-e exhibition, we are covering all aspects of that show. We've already talked about the lobby exhibition and what's going on in the Playhouse Theater. Today we're going to talk about another one of those ancillary exhibitions, this time one that deals with the history of anime and manga. This unique installation in our studio theater was conceived by museum staff and executed by the designers from 2D Restaurant, and we're going to speak to all of them today. So first, we're going to speak to Julia Walker and Madelene Pryzbyz. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you both doing today?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Julia, you've been on before. Obviously, Julia is our assistant curator at the Cleve Carney Museum of Art. Madelene, this is your first time. Do you want to introduce yourself and explain what you do at the museum?
Yeah, happy to be here. I am the gallery assistant with the museum and the preparator as well.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know art lingo, preparator is the fancy term museums use for installer. Today, I want to talk to you both not about inside the museum, but one of these exhibits we've created elsewhere in the Mackinac Art Center, and that is the exhibit in the studio theater. Julia, when this project started, we already knew that we would have to create multiple additional exhibits. Last time we did this for the Andy Warhol exhibition, you curated a show of photos in the studio theater. And this time we thought we would use that space again, but we wanted to do something that really played into the popularity of Japanese comics and animation, and specifically tied into their connection with the artist of Ukiyo-e.
So after much thought, we decided to focus on anime and manga. We thought it would bring in another audience to look at the exhibit, bring in some more excitement from a different demographic. And also it was something that we didn't really have the opportunity to talk about in the lobby or in the museum gallery space. And so it was a good place to talk about a brand new topic and introduce it to visitors who maybe are already familiar with it and love it, or some who didn't know anything about it and had no previous interest in it.
Yeah, so manga is just the term for Japanese comics, hugely popular. Anime is just the animation that kind of evolved out of that history. And there is a lot of stylistic similarities between, especially the sketchbooks and manga of Hokusai, right? But to say we were experts on the subject would be a huge stretch. I kind of recall a feeling of, oh yeah, we'll figure that out. Oh my God, how are we going to figure this out as we were doing everything else? But then you had a suggestion that maybe we work with someone who could help us execute this in a way that would make it really unique.
So we had, for Back to Warhol, we had partnered with 2D Restaurant in Chicago. They produced like a promotion donut for us. That was really cute. And their whole
Those promotion donuts. You got to love a good promotion donut.
Promotion donuts. Their restaurant's really cool. It's hand painted to look like you're walking into a two-dimensional space.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking about anime and manga and how it's all very flat as it pulls from the more traditional Japanese art. And wouldn't it be cool if we had like a bookshelf that was flat? And then that kind of snowballed.
Yeah, I think we, there was a discussion we wanted to have the history, some examples, maybe some sort of library we were talking about. I think we were building it around this idea that it was a reading room or a library. And I was looking at some of our early sketches. We kind of had a center shelf, maybe with a screen in the back. We kind of knew the basic shape. But this was, a great idea. And we reached out to Kevin Yu and Vanessa Vu of 2D Restaurant, who I'll be talking to shortly. And they were on board to kind of create the 2D aspect of this. But that didn't mean our work was done, right? Because Julie is still on the content side. We still had to craft what the story this exhibition told.
So after talking to Kevin and Vanessa, who are big fans of manga and anime and kind of their favorite stories that they like to focus on, and then doing my own research to see kind of what are the pivotal moments in anime and manga history, we kind of determined we'd have these 4 rooms. So there's the Edo period room that talks about Hokusai's manga and where that came from, what manga means or meant in that period. And then the next room jumps into the 1960s, 70s, an early modern take on anime and manga. So we have the history of the Americans coming in with their comics and that meeting with Japanese manga and what that does to the medium. And then we jump into the more 80s, 90s Dragon Ball era, where it's kind of considered the golden age of manga and anime, where it's everywhere and it's really gone fully global. And then we move into contemporary manga. That's all about how contemporary manga is different from what happened previously. It's more diverse, it's more inclusive, it's darker. So kind of tracing that history.
It's so good to be so inclusive with darker themes. It's so it's more, it's scarier, it's more depressing, but we welcome more people into that world.
We're all scared.
Welcome to our shared dystopian reality. So, but at the center of this, still that initial idea of a library and a viewing room really stayed as an anchor, and it was a development of kind of 4 spaces off the center of this. And that structure was constructed, Maddie, a lot based on what was available with our temporary wall system. Maddie, can you kind of explain what that wall system is and what it involved for us to get it in there and set up to create that space? And maybe what steps had to happen first, because I think I forgot a pretty key step that happened before we put the walls up.
Well, I think, where should I start? The walls are, like you said and mentioned, are like an interlocking system. So each panel of a wall has a latch that will fit and kind of lock into its next partner, and so on and so forth.
And they're German, so they're very good.
They're very good.
Very precise.
Yes, very nicely engineered, very easy to use as well.
But not light.
Heavy.
No.
So heavy.
Easy to assemble. Cumbersome to move.
Yes.
Especially when, Justin, you're 6 foot. Almost, right?
I'm 6'2". I'm 6'2". I'm not almost 6 foot.
You shortchanged me.
Everyone's taller than me. And so
I am 2 inches beyond 6 feet. Okay, carry on. Sorry.
5 foot moving.
Almost 6 foot. Oh, well, nice talking to you, Maddie. Moving on. Okay, carry on. Sorry.
Okay. Anyway.
Easier for me to handle that. I do have a larger wingspan and taller. Yeah.
Exactly. You have a height advantage and arm wingspan advantage as well. So moving these around, you definitely need at least 2 people, but you can move them around by yourself as well. But what we had to do was we had to prep all of our walls from previous shows and count all the walls to make sure that we had the correct amount to build the little coves in that room, some of which we had to pull from the student galleries, which are all the way across campus. And then we had to wheel that into the studio theater.
Yeah, so we were like stripping them, stacking them in there. Each one's about 100, 110 pounds. But before we put that in, 2D had designed a special linoleum floor
We had to lay down a masonite layer. Well, first, before then, I'm even getting ahead of myself. We had to lay down a plastic layer um, of just covering all of the floor with painter's plastic, and then layering masonite. And the main
Because
focus
it's a
was this.
floating floor, right? We couldn't
Yeah,
drill into the floor either. So it's just floating. Yeah.
it's just floating. And then we finally got the floor after such a delay,
Like a
and we had
3-week
to,
delay.
yeah,
Yeah.
lay down that.
Which is
And then
always
it was,
good. It's always good when you have an exhibition that's so. I like it when you set up an installation schedule that's very tight, and then the first element needed has a 3-week delay. I find that that is a kind of a fun diversion, because it's like, oh,
Gives you something to think about.
nothing's happening the way it should. Yay!
yay, this is great. This is great. What else can we do in this time? And so, yeah, we had to lay down plastic, then masonite, and then the linoleum, and then the walls were finally put up.
Yeah, and that just got us to, the starting point. And then Vanessa was creating all the illustrations for the walls that she would send over as digital files that we then had to format into panels that we could send to our print shop that would be printed like wallpaper. And then after Maddie had moved the stuff and helped glue a lot of the flooring down, we had to install the vinyl. And that is really the wormhole that Maddie went down for the next several weeks. How much wallpaper do you think you installed in that space? How many hours did you spend hanging black and white wallpaper in the History of Manga exhibition? I'm going to guess it was 1,000. Is that right?
Oh, double.
Double
Triple
2,000.
that. Well, all I know is for a majority of that time, I did zone out while putting up all that vinyl. So I feel like I was time traveling because I don't know what time it was being in a black box theater.
That's true. Yeah.
Because I had no access to the outside world for 9 to 5.
We're in there.
Which sounds terrible.
Oh my gosh.
But I don't know how
So
long
you went
I
in
stayed up.
April, you came out at the end of May, and it was all
Yeah.
done. We were delayed a little bit by the flooring. This was a space that was really a time crunch at the end. And one of my favorite memories of the show is really like the day before the preview. Some of the wall panels weren't back from the printer yet because we also got those kind of a little later. And we were just like, put whatever scraps up. We got to cover the walls. And we're running around just covering the walls. And even though some of the walls had temporary coverings, it was all covered. And people instantly loved it. I think 2D, who I'll talk to you in a minute, did a great job. But both of you are such a huge part of this exhibit that I think Lori Waxman from the Tribune, when she was writing about the show, explained like one of the most inspired ancillary exhibits on the show, like the ones outside the museum, was this space. And I agree. And I think it's really so much because of the work you both have done and nobody sees, you know what I mean? So again, I would say thank you again, but I want to emphasize 6 feet 2 inches tall. Almost 3. It's very clear on the record.
I'm sorry.
6'5" at least.
Okay, well, while we're at it, 5 foot flat.
5 foot flat. You'd think 10 foot from all the work you've done. So thank you so much. I'm gonna say goodbye to you both now and talk to Kevin from 2D Design. All right, talk soon. Right now, I'm joined by Kevin Yu from 2D Restaurant. Kevin, thanks for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me, Justin.
First, for people who don't know, do you want to explain what 2D Restaurant is?
A 2D restaurant is an entire restaurant that's dedicated to black and white art, including manga and various forms of comic. Walking to the restaurant feels like you're walking into a life-size comic book. from the floor, the furniture, the walls are all hand drawn, dedicated to various of different things and topic. Our first shop in Lakeview, the entire restaurant tells the story of our honeymoon in Paris that never happened due to the pandemic. And then the second store was dedicated to my childhood in Taiwan. And then we have one in suburb that dedicated to Route 66 with a full-size camper that we turned into black and white comic.
Oh, amazing. And where did the idea come from to, one, start a restaurant, but then to approach it in this manner?
So Vanessa and I both grew up in Taiwan, in Asia. I grew up in Taiwan. She grew up in Vietnam. And when we met in Seattle back in almost 10 years ago, we found out we both have this passion for comic. We have this manga called Doraemon. I think we have that in the exhibit as well as our common interest. So during the pandemic, like the rest of us, we're stuck at home. I think everybody took on the habit of baking. Everybody draw. We got 50 plants at home everywhere. Back then, I had another restaurant that does ramen, and we were talking about what can we do to make a unique memory that make COVID not so depressing. So we were started thinking about maybe we can create a unique concept that people have never seen before. And comic manga. Just one day, I was looking at my manga in the living room, and she came out with the idea: what if we draw the entire restaurant black and white, and it's like you're walking into a comic book. And next thing you know, 4,000 pages later, we created a restaurant that we have never seen before.
So you were already in the restaurant industry prior to this, and Vanessa, she's an interior designer, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's kind of the careers that you were in before this, and this was the first. Was this the first collaborative project you'd done? I know you're partners in life, but is this the first project you've done together?
Yeah, as a husband and wife, a business partner duo, this is definitely the first venture that we started together.
Is it the last? Is it the last? Well, you guys do an amazing job, which is why one of the reasons when Julie and I knew we had to do this history of manga and anime exhibit, and you had kind of partnered with us before for the Warhol exhibition. You had made kind of custom donuts at your shop and done a lot of social around that. And so Julia suggested we reach out to you to help us create this space. So I'm curious what you thought about the opportunity and how you approached it that was maybe a little different than you would one of your restaurants.
I was more than excited because I love manga. Vanessa loved manga. Mm-hmm. The storyteller in me had visions and things we want to do. Mm-hmm. The interior designer in Vanessa freaked out a little bit. We have never done such a project before.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we work. I'm the optimist that always want to venture out for challenges we have never done before. Mm-hmm. And then she is the conserve partner that always pull me back to reality from 2D. And look in the scope and start picking out things that could become roadblocks. But the good thing is, before this life, I was gonna be an architect. My mom is an architect, so I love spatial designs, and I'm also a project manager as well in another life. So I was able to scope out the entire scope and show her how is it possible to make such space under 3 months. Kind of give her a little peace in mind. But overall, once I think the first design came out, we both fall in love with it. We look in the entire world, there's nothing like it. Especially I think Hokusai exhibit wise there are a few, but there's none that what CCMA is trying to do, making it more than just a display of art, but really about experience. I think at the moment people enter the museum, the front exhibit, the Edo Street, the garden, those are things people have never experienced in a Hokusai exhibit. We look at I think the closest one I can say is one in Guam, but that is still not to the scope that what CCMA and us were trying to establish. And I think that's something definitely excites us.
Well, it's unique because for these shows we're partnering with an entire art center, right? So we have the theaters and the theater staff doing the Edo, but we also get to. That also meant that your work got to be in a black box theater, which I think really helped it because of the lighting, but also it makes it such kind of a distinct experience. You know, you walk in, it's very controlled. And I was talking to Julia and Maddie a little bit about the time constraints. And one thing that helped, we were talking about the temporary walls, but also usually Vanessa and you hand paint everything in your restaurants, right? Like the walls, everything's hand painted. And we knew we wouldn't have time to do that in this exhibit. So it was all created as digital files that then were printed as wallpaper. Was that a new way of doing it? And was that trickier, not being directly in the space, just kind of creating files and sending them off? Or what did you learn from that process?
So we did that with our current 2D restaurant in Lakeview.
Okay.
So the 2D restaurant currently is all hand drawn.
Okay.
And the vision of the business strategy was to redraw that once a year,
Right.
to create newness to bring people back. And that's a businessman of me wanted to be able to refresh the concept. Mm-hmm. But the husband in me freaked out. I think she spent over 6 months drawing the entire project with our another artist, Mia. I was afraid to touch her artwork, and there's so much detail she's putting there.
Right. So it's hard to run a restaurant in there then because you're so worried about the work.
Oh yeah, I mean, so true. And so we've been applying additional art on top of the current 2D restaurant to create seams and pop-ups. So last summer we had a collab with Godzilla. So one of the room had was we using the same method, the vinyl stickers to replace a wall for a big portion of the dining room. And I think that's the same thing for a lot of small business, even us or like the museum. You always find ways to make things work.
Right.
And you always try to be as creative as possible. And I think that's something I really appreciate working with you all is, the not only the professionalism, but the creativity behind it. That's something that that was eye-opening for me of, working with talents in such a caliber that that the collaboration process was so much easier for me.
Yeah, well, but it's also different, right? Because when you have your own restaurant, you're the one calling all the shots all the time, right? So coming into into an existing space and work, that's probably some adjustment too. And we appreciate that flexibility for sure, especially because I think I was mentioning earlier that the Chicago Tribune review came out and it said, it pointed out of all of the ancillary exhibits outside of the museum, the one that was the most inspired was the space that you two created. And I agree. And I think our visitors agree as well. I think it's such a kind of dynamic space, especially because you walk in and it's so bright. It's still very informative, but you're really transported to another world. There's not even windows in this space so you can see something out. You're just completely locked into that world. And I think it's created a real strong brand for you both. So much so that it's starting to be imitated, I've noticed. a little bit across the...
That's happening.
Yeah.
It's really
but
interesting.
You guys are the original, right? You're the original ones who did this.
Yeah. at this point, I think we're being recognized as this sort of art. But I think it's definitely a trend because
Hmm.
I actually want. I'm curious for you as a curator.
Hmm.
One of the fun thing I saw with exhibit was you will have family coming through, and
Yes.
the parents love the 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 arts in the front, and the kids will be
Hmm.
pulling the parents all the whole
Yeah.
time. Go, I want to go check out like the Edo Street. I want to check out the garden.
Yeah.
I want to check out the kids area. I want to check out 2D. And that's something I did not have as myself as a kid growing up. My mom
Hmm.
is an architect slash interior designer, so we visit museum everywhere we go.
Yeah.
And as a kid, there was an iPhone back then, so the best I could do is either play with my fingers or you know play with random rocks everywhere I can find. Um, but now you start seeing a lot more immersive, experience based
Yeah.
exhibit that does not require such a high level of understanding of art. You could
Hmm.
like think um, during the pandemic, there's a lot of I think there was I think 4 or 5 different exhibit that's immersive experience only.
Hmm.
And how do you incorporate that trend with
Well,
the requirement? I could call it requirement of getting the attention of Gen Zs nowadays.
I think it's a tricky, yeah, during the pandemic, I think a lot of producers a lot of them were coming from the theatrical side, realized that there's a lot of artwork out there that's no longer copyright protected, and they could create video mapped, and this kind of aligned with like cheaper video mapping options. And so, like in Chicago, a lot of places there was the immersive Van Gogh, where it was basically like video mapping just on all surfaces of a room. And I think it got a lot of attention because it was new. It came along during COVID where people could go, and like you said, it was very accessible. Um, the problem with a lot of those that then developed is people like, oh, here's a mode to make money with very little. We have to invest in the video mapping, but we can project anything. There wasn't much content, right? So after a few minutes in that space, it's kind of okay. Now what? There wasn't a lot of meat behind the showing, and so I think since the immersion of these shows, which still go on, I think the museum world has really been grappling how do we deal with this. And I think honestly, initially, a lot of the approach was oppositional, right? Because of the lack of that content, and it seemed kind of cheaper in a way. But I think to ignore it is a mistake because it's meeting audiences where they are and what they expect now, right? What they can interact with, the amount of entertainment they have. So what we're doing at the museum and the Mackinac Art Center for sure is we are pushing forward the evolution, saying, well, this is part of it, but how do we pair it with other aspects? So when you have a core like a great collection from the Ukiyo-e that still has to be presented in a way that's safe for the work, and you have that information, but you surround it by other immersive elements that also then you put in a lot of information and facts and content, you start to find a balance. And I think that's what people really react to because it is fun, it is accessible, it is immersive in the best sense. And then at the same time, once people are in it, they learn. And I think ultimately once they learn and walk away with like, oh, I didn't know that, or that's really fascinating, it's more lasting. So I think it's really part of an evolution. And I hope that bigger institutions take that approach too, because I still think at like large art museums, there's still kind of a negative viewpoint of it because because it's so contrary to what they've done, and I think that anytime you invest a lot in what you do a certain way, when something comes along and challenges that, it's difficult, right?
Sound like there's like a education and entertainment that
Yeah.
that you're trying to balance. So I mean, as a curator, I mean, I think I can definitely vouch for you. This exhibit definitely plays into this balance more than anything else I've ever seen so far in the market. How do you think this is going to evolve in the next few years?
Oh, wait, is this your podcast now?
No,
Okay.
no, I'm sorry.
Well, Kevin, I think it's funny because I think it had this, we're seeing that we're middle of the evolution. So the first large exhibit we did was, we had this amazing collection of works from Frida Kahlo, first large summer exhibit we've did. And we knew that was not enough because there's so much interest. So I worked to create a historical exhibit in the lobby area with assistant curator Marcela Andrade, who no longer works at the museum. And we worked with different museum professionals in Chicago to develop that space. And then almost as kind of an afterthought, we thought, we could use the Playhouse Theater to show some work that's been inspired by Frida by former students who are differently abled. And then Diana Martinez was like, well, I want to do a kids area too. So there's something for kids. And it was just those 4 areas. And I think what we saw is people loved the exhibit, but then they also loved this additional stuff. So then the next year it evolved. The theater department really is like, well, we want to get involved. So we're going to build a set in the Playhouse. And they did Studio 54. So the ancillary show that we had done in the Playhouse moved to the Studio Theater. And we did, again, the lobby. And then we did a show of his photographs. And again, Diana worked on the kids area and then a garden. So it's kind of evolved, right? And so I think, I don't know, there's only so much space we have because we are sprawling out into unconventional. But I think it's that pairing. And it's also what we're starting to be known for. But what I think will happen is other people will start picking up on that more as well. But how about for you? Like, this is not the first museum situation or art exhibit situation you've paired with, right? That's something that you're doing more and more of.
Yeah, that's something we're hoping. But I gotta say, it's life comes around because when I got into high school in Taiwan, I funked art. I'm at 10th grade art. I funked art. I was joking with Vanessa one night. I was like, life comes around at ways you can't expect it. We could never expect our passion for manga, for art, would be part of exhibit. But I think one of the big vision for us is also educational. Being a minority in the States, we want to be able to share our passion for certain aspect of our culture that we're proud of.
Yeah.
I think manga, the black and white comic, it is a portion that we are proudly presented at all time. It's very interesting because when we're showcasing the black and white art more in the form of manga or Asian comics, when people come into our store, people from the States, their first reaction was, it looks like Aha, the video from Aha. And
I'm
if you
guilty
have
of that.
anybody else coming from Asia, they were like, this looks like comic book.
Yeah.
What people don't realize was the simple form of black and white art would create such a big different culture difference. Since most of the comics in the States are colored.
Right.
The comic in Asia have gone through such an interesting period, which even until today, 98.5% of the comics are still black and white.
Yeah.
Things is coming from such a competitive market. I think in part of the exhibit we mentioned about this magazine in Japan called the Weekly Shonen Jump, which will have 15, 20 artists, pitching in pages of their latest work. And if you make it in that magazine, you might have a chance to get published.
Okay.
And that's why most of the comic we read, even until today, are still black and white. So, like, one of the things I tell people all the time was in the exhibit we create a room for Demon Slayer,
right?
Which they have a movie coming up this summer in September, I want to say. Before that, I think Julia even found a few copies of Demon Slayer that's available to be read in the exhibit. So you can, if you really look at that artwork, the details of that manga book, I would probably call it a 4 or 5 out of 10.
Yeah.
And before that, it was in the magazine. That's probably like a 2 out of 10. But then you see the evolvement of that particular manga to now it's being made into a movie. The
Right.
details are a 10 out of 10.
Right.
And that evolution of manga is something that we want to showcase and tell the story. And that's a lot of, I think a lot of immigrants, a lot of can relate to that, which we started from nothing, and then you slowly climb your ladder. I think that's what makes manga sexy for a lot of people. You know, you can
Because it
relate
has
to
that. There's an opportunity for anything to catch on and develop because of the accessibility not only of the audiences but the production, because it's such a rapid, fairly, cost-effective way at the beginning. But I have two questions based on that. First, I think the aha reference is maybe more towards like Gen X maybe, and younger people definitely like Gen Z. I think they would recognize it as manga right away because that has become the most popular comic form in the States as well, which goes back to that immigrant experience, right? Where it's this bringing in, sharing of culture and tradition that eventually gets folded into the American experience and then evolves and then becomes very present. And I think that that's why it's so popular, is that a lot of younger people very much recognize it and know the characters and are very into it. And that's because of, that started more with the animation side. They're introduced through animation, and then maybe Pokemon or fun, like more like child geared games and comics geared them towards a wider world. But whatever the reason is, people absolutely love it. So I want to, thank you so much for the work that you and Vanessa have done. And I'm curious, what else you have going on? Because I know, in the same vein of sharing more than sharing with some of your culture, sharing different aspects of your audience, you also do a lot of activities at your restaurants, right? So is there anything special coming up that you want to talk about?
Oh yeah. So on top of visual arts, we like to put the arts to work. So this summer we were decorating 2D bags with kids in our communities. So to a point which we're throwing summer day camps. I have a 5-year-old, so I love kids. But we'll be doing some our 2D related art with kids in the store. Me loving arts, we do a lot of culinary art experiments in the store. So we often, I think once a month, we will have kids come into the store. We'll decorate donuts with them. That's been a really big part of what we do in the store. There are a few different culinary art programs coming up as well. Earlier this year, we did a dumpling making workshop to showcase our neighbors how to make dumplings at home. And Vanessa hosted the first gaigwen, or the Vietnamese spring roll workshop. We'll have a couple more workshops coming up after the summer. 2D in general, we're very, very lucky to have a lot of family supports. So in the summers, we are busy since all the parents are needing places to go with their kids. So most of our workshops going to resume after September. So our team can focus on the guests over the summer. But stay tuned. We got a couple more collabs coming up next year, and tons of different Asian culinary and art workshop in the restaurant. They mostly take place in our Fullerton Market store and our Lakeview store.
Okay. And where can people find all of this information online?
Definitely our websites and also Instagram. So my wife Vanessa takes care of our Instagram like her second baby that she couldn't let go. So there's a lot of great information out there. Both have our latest information up to date.
And what's the website address?
That will be 2d-restaurant.com.
Okay. And again, the locations, what are the addresses of the locations in Chicago?
Yeah, so the one in Lakeview is at 3155 North Hosted Street. That's where, just a little north of where the Blue Man Group used to be, one of our dearest friends. They actually came into our store. It was hilarious. We had a bunch of blue men walking around in the 2D world. And then one in Fullerton Market is inside the Timeout Market in
Oh,
West
amazing.
Loop.
Yeah. So both very popular parts of town. So you'll probably find yourself if you're listening, definitely check out the restaurants. Because I should also mention that being like a school and an art museum at a school, an art center at the school, it's not like we paid Vanessa and Kevin a ton of money. You know, a lot of this they did out of their passion. So if you really like what they've done in the exhibit, please go check out the restaurant, check out their website, and support what they do so they can continue to do it. And also, it'll be worth your time. So thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Justin.
No, thank you. So much of what you've done to make it possible. So, all right. Have a great week, Kevin. We'll see you soon.